Hi friends, welcome to my channel. My name's Fiddle, and apparently Frankie wanted to say hello too. Today we are going to be finishing up Ginger's project where I'm going to show you where I made the overall book Nook structure. There's a lot that goes into this, so hopefully I can get it all in an hour video or less. I guess we'll find out. We do not have a scavenger hunt for this tutorial because I don't go too much into detail about sizes other than this diagram right here. That shows the overall size. So with that being said, let's get into it. Most of the structure is made from cardboard and corrugated plastic that I had left over from lining up my house. I did make the very base out of wood though. One of the most important structure pieces was the wall with the window. Yes, Frankie. Okay, let's try that again. Sorry. I drew and cut the window and then found some burgundy maroon colored paper in my paper book, and I thought this was perfect for a witchy cottage. I want to do half wall wood, so I used scrap cardboard or chipboard, cereal box, or in my case frozen pizza box. To add more detail, I used a ball stylist and a pair of scissors to carve in lines that looked more like wood grain. To frame the window for the top part, I used cardboard, but for the bottom portion or windowsill, I used popsicle stick. I had to make it too wide because it was just a little bit too thin to make it all the way to the outside ledge. To make my cardboard wood trim look more realistic, I used my alcohol markers and colored them in a few different colors of brown. Because I used scissors and it kind of pulled up the cardboard as I went, this gave it a darker look in those spots. To give the window more detail, I added a cross section of trim, glued it to the plastic I was using as glass. Then I can assemble the window and the wall. Next, I added trim along the top edge of my wood wall. While the walls are drying, I went ahead and moved to making the stones for the floor and the outside walls. To make the stones, I cut egg crate up into round shapes and then painted them gray. Once they were dry, I did go over them with a watered down black to get inside all the cracks and really show the detail of them. To make a mortar for the floor, I mixed up some brown and white paint with a little bit of fine white sand and PVA glue and smoothed it around with my palette knife. Another good material to use for the mortar would be drywall mud or mud compound, white glue, and paint. While my paint and sand mixture was still wet, I added my stones. I tried to get them as close together as I possibly could without overlapping. While that was drying, I moved on to what I really think is my favorite part of the whole thing, and that is the moon. I used a Pizza Saver tripod table, cut the legs off, and then sanded it as best I could. That got rid of the bumps from the legs, the logo on top, and scratched up the surface so my alcohol marker would stick better. Now it was ready for color. As usual, I'm using alcohol markers in a variety of grays. I started by making a bunch of circles in a medium gray color. Next, I used what was supposed to be a lighter gray color and covered over the whole thing. Afterwards, I came back in with a black and just colored in a little bit of the center of the circles to give it a little bit more shading. Now that I had the moon ready, I had to figure out how I was going to diffuse the light for the moon and block it for the rest of the wall. My initial thought was just to paint it black, but as you can still see the lights all the way through. My next best option was sticky back black felt. It was dark and thick enough to block all the light coming through. Next, I traced the wall panel onto the back of the felt, along with the moon. Because I had already painted this wall piece black, I had to cut another one so that way it would be white behind the moon. Now I can peel the paper backing off and stick it to the wall. Next, I glued the moon in place and covered the two remaining walls in the black felt. To make space for the lights behind the moon, I had to cut another wall and cut the moon out. And speaking of lights, I made a diagram to show you where and how I was stringing the fairy lights. Starting with the end furthest away from the battery pack, I had 3 lights on the inside of the wall for going inside the cauldrons, with them being strung through just above the floor. Then they go around to the outside and up to about the middle of the wall to come through for the candles on top of the hutch. To keep it neat and tidy, I went back through the same hole. Next, I went up the wall to the top and then crossed over to the outside wall. Then down to the moon, where I bunched up the last bit of the lights. To hold the battery pack in place, I traced it onto the wall and cut it out, making a channel to lead to the moon. My head was in the way for most of the shot, so here's what it looks like after cutting it out. To hide all this mess, and because the battery pack still stuck out a little bit, I put some paint on the back of it and then set another wall up against it to transfer the shape. With that done, I covered all the panels with felt and made sure to get inside the grooves so the inset was there. With all of that done, I can add the Starry Sky. To figure the best way to do it, I had to do a little bit of experimenting, and I came up with the solution of using adhesive spray all over the black felt and then sprinkling glitter all over it. To make sure it was all stuck down, I used my pencil and rolled over it like a roller. Because the spray adhesive left a white residue, I went over it with a black permanent marker, and that really made a difference. With the stars done and the pieces still apart, I went ahead and attached the back panel and then all three sides together, then attached them to the main structure. My next task was to figure out how to make sure that the wall would stay in place but still be movable, and my solution was some pretty strong magnets from a computer hard drive, and I used UV resin to hold them in place. Now that I had a way for the wall to be secured, I needed to figure out how to make the light stay where the moon is. To do that, I covered a piece of cardboard with more sticky felt, leaving tabs on both ends, and gluing it over the moon. Because I made my walls thicker than I had originally planned, I went ahead and added another base to the bottom to give a surface area for the walls to rest on. Then it was on to the outside stonework, and I think out of the whole project this was my biggest challenge. I really wanted it to look like a solid piece and hide my seams for the flip down wall. To do that, I bent some of my stones, that way they curved around the corner, and for those ones I stuck them to the flip down wall itself, and then for the side wall I just used a longer piece and let it stick out over the side. And for the most part my head was in the way, sorry. For the roof, I used chipboard, making a cone shape into a regular pitched roof, and held it together with tape while the glue dried. Next, I glued it to the rest of the structure, making sure to leave a little bit of space for the opening and closing of the back wall. Then it was time to add the trim to the outside. For this I did use wood, mostly popsicle sticks, colored them with my alcohol marker, and then cut them to shape. Next it was on to thatching in the roof, and I didn't really record any of this because it's basically the same way that we made the broom, only on a much larger scale. Then it was time to put everything together. I won't go through it all, but I will show you how I did the table. First, I had to make the big decision of where to put the cauldrons, then drill holes. To make sure that the holes corresponded with the holes in the bottom of the cauldrons, I used a toothpick to poke it through and then super glued them in place. I did come back later on and used resin to make sure they were secure. Now all I would have to do is put the lights all the way through the bottom of the table into the cauldron to make it light up. And if you hadn't caught it before, I went with blue, green, and red for the cauldrons, just like the Sanderson sisters. Just a few more things left to do. I made a metal hook to hang the bird cage from, poked a hole in the ceiling, and then got my tool stuck. Twisted the hook through and then resined it in place. The last thing I had to do was make it look like the broom was actually doing something since it moves about. So I took some tea leaves and put it down on the floor. And for the first time I tried to make a little video showing all the details, although it gets a little shaky at the end. And with that, it brings us to the end of our tutorial. I really hope this gives you some ideas for your next project. And as always, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe, as it all really helps me out a lot. Thank you so much, Ginger, and I'll see you next time.